Hello and welcome to this quick video on the big ideas involved in the Cold War. So in this video what we're going to look at is freedom, money and power and the differences between the USSR and the USA. So we're going to start with some key words. So first one is liberty. So liberty means freedom. So if we say it's somebody's liberty, we mean it's somebody's freedom. The second is state. So this is a synonym for the word government. So if we say it's a big state, we mean it's big government. Constitution is a set of rules in which a country is run, by which a country is run. And oppression is when there's cruel or unjust treatment and it's an exercise of authority over somebody else. So you're oppressing somebody else. So what we're going to look at is this struggle between these two superpowers. So by the end of the Second World War in 1945, Russia, the USSR, and the USA were the two big superpowers in the world. China wasn't at this point, so China don't become a superpower until much later on. So we'll start by looking at the idea of freedom. So in America had won independence from Britain in 1776, and they had hated this idea of British rule. So Americans are all about their freedom. You can't impose it on my freedom. So they set up a constitution, and this is a set of rules running their country. And the first 10 amendments of it are about their rights. So they have a Bill of Rights, and they hate this idea of interfering with their freedom. So they distrust government interference. They don't like government interference. So in these Bills of Rights, for example, you have things like that you're allowed to own a gun, and it's all about your right. You've got this freedom to Fifth Amendment, pleading the Fifth. You don't have to say something in court of law. They're all about freedom. So they're quite worried about communism. So they're worried about the spread of communism and the communists taking over other countries. They're also worried about their precious freedoms. So if a communist takes over, you get rid of your freedoms. And a lot of Americans, even still today, they distrust the government. They don't like the idea of a government being heavily involved in people's lives. So even to the extent that we know that they don't have an NHS, because NHS is run by government. So they have private hospitals. So there's a lot more private enterprise in America. In contrast, in the USSR, the government controls everything. So when the government took over in 1917, in the communist Russia, the government controls everything. You don't have freedoms. Your job is just to serve the Communist Party. And there is a secret police, the KGB, who enforces these laws. So you're not allowed to criticize the government. You're not allowed to say anything against the government. And you certainly wouldn't get a fair trial in communist Russia. And this is exemplified by the fact that Stalin himself, who was the leader, killed 9 million of his own people. So you've got to think there's very few freedoms in Russia. There's also a big contrast in terms of how money operates in these two countries. So the Americans believe in that everyone can be successful, no matter your starting point. So it's your right to own your own business, to make something of yourself, to make money. And if you're really wealthy, and lots of Americans wanted to be really wealthy, it's because you've worked hard, you've come up with a great idea, and they want to spend that money on whatever they like. And people can get very wealthy in the USA. And they don't want to give that privately earned money to the government. So America often has very low taxes because they don't want to give, if they think if I've earned it, I spend it. I shouldn't give it to the government. So these wealthy people are, again, really worried about the spread of communism because they're worried that they won't be allowed to be successful, that they'll all be poor like they are in communist Russia. The big business, so these big enterprises like McDonald's and Ford's, they'll be taken over by the government, and therefore people won't have a choice in setting up their own businesses. And that's because in communist Russia, the communists, when they come into power, they take over all business. They control the wealth of the country. All workers are paid by the state. You can't suddenly make money. You're just paid on how much you work. And because of that, you can't become rich. It's the government's decision on all those things. And there aren't private companies like McDonald's or Ford or all the other big American companies because the government controls everything. So, like we said before, these countries are ideologically, so that's the ideas about how the country is run, very, very different. And these differences were put aside during the Second World War because they were fighting the Nazis. But one of the big tensions was at the end of the war, the USA used the first atomic bomb against Japan, and that shows America's power. Russia get atomic weapons in 1952, but already there's tensions. The USSR, after the Second World War, are looking to expand. The idea of communism is that communist countries want all other countries to be communist. So Russia starts to expand in Eastern Europe, takes over lots of countries, makes them communist. And that creates a lot of fear in America. So the USA don't want communism to spread, and therefore tension starts and a Cold War starts.